Hello and welcome to a special edition of the In the Money Players podcast. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, coming to you live from Keeneland Racecourse, and very excited to be joined by two guests I've had the pleasure of speaking with about all kinds of racing, particularly the Breeders' Cup. And we're going to be talking about our best bets at this year's Breeders' Cup, or I'm going to make them talk about their best bets, I should say. We bring them in now. I'm going to introduce them in tandem since they're appearing in tandem here on the YouTube channel. From NBC Sports, two of the more entertaining TV pundits anywhere in the world, we have Randy Moss and Jerry Bailey. Gentlemen, and I use that term loosely, how are you?
You got first billing again. You always get first billing.
Just to avoid confusion, this is Randy Moss. I'm Jerry Bailey. I hope you guys are.
Jerry, the problem is if I start doing my usual style intro with you, the whole 45 minutes is going to be me talking about races you want. So I just thought it was better to the chase. I hope you don't mind.
We're good. We're good. And we're ready to talk about the Breeders' Cup. We've been doing nothing but cramming with, my gosh, all the paperwork and past performances.
See, Randy's stuck back in 1990s. All of mine is on my iPad.
No, you're on my iPad right now, Pete. I have an iPad too, but I don't put it all on my iPad like you.
Very high-tech stuff going on over there at NBC. We'll start with the cheap plug, because it's not that cheap of a plug, because everybody out there wants to be watching the NBC coverage. Randy, can you give us the skinny on when you guys will be live over the course of the next 2 days and which of the NBC family of networks you'll be on when?
Jerry can probably give you the skinny more than I can. I know we start on USA. Typically, I get up and go to the set when Jerry says it's time to go. So I don't pay much attention to timing or anything. When it comes to meetings or on air, Jerry's like, "Come on, Randy, it's time to go." Oh, geez, okay, hang on. But we start on USA both days.
3 o'clock. Actually, go on air at 2 o'clock on Friday to 6 p.m.
All on USA on Friday.
All on USA. And on Saturday, it's USA from 12 to 3:30, and then NBC from 3:30 to 6.
That sounds good. I told you he would know.
Very impressive. Let's talk about what you're seeing as the most interesting horses potentially to bet on this Breeders' Cup card. We'll open it up to the 2 days. We'll start off. We'll do 5 races from each of you that we'll talk about. We can double up. No problem there at all. Let's throw it over. Since I gave him second billing in the intro, when it comes to giving a race to talk about, we'll throw it right to the Hall of Famer, Jerry Bailey. Jerry,
So do you want to end with the best race of the day?
Yeah, let's go from your 5th favorite to your number 1 favorite. We'll do like a countdown. YouTube videos love a good countdown.
Okay, so I guess we'll start with the juvenile. There's not a lot of drama in it to me. There's not a lot of guesswork in it. I mean, you start with Bob Baffert because he's got the fastest 2-year-old in the country, and it's pretty much that simple. His numbers are just faster than any 2-year-old by far. He typically goes to the lead, which I would expect again. And I think he's probably at least 2 to 3 lengths better than his nearest competitor, which would probably be Todd Pletcher trained Forte.
So from a betting perspective, Jerry's trying to tell you he wants to single Cave Rock.
And doing exactly, because I think it's pretty cold.
Those are the 2 for you. Have you had a chance to see Cave Rock in the flesh this week?
Yes.
Yes, we have.
What'd you think?
He's a beast.
I think I used that exact word in a text about him. Really, really impressive individual. I thought it was interesting, Jerry, that you actually mentioned numbers before you mentioned the appearance that he's made. Has that always been the case with you, even when you were in the SAT, you were who looked at numbers?
Yeah, when I look at races, immediately the first thing I look at is the buyer numbers.
He knows.
And then I have to double check with Randy Moss to make sure they're accurate.
which they 99.99% of the time.
But when a horse stands out that much, to me, there's really very little question. And then I go consistency. And it's hard to do that with 2-year-olds because they only had a couple of races, sometimes only one. But look at Bob Baffert's usually don't bail out and not run to their numbers in the Breeders' Cup. So I'm going to go with the fact that I think he'll run back that number, which is clearly faster than any other 2-year-old in the race.
All right. So now, since we're focused on betting here, in the juvenile fillies on Friday, there is a 12-1 shot in the program. I don't think she'll be 12-1, but I think it's a good race to maybe try to take a shot against the favorites. Not that there's anything really wrong with Chocolate Gelato. She's a deserving favorite. I just don't think she lays over the field. The other Pletcher horse, Atomically, to me, especially if you get anything close to 12-1, is going to be a pretty good play. Visually, loved the way she won her last couple of races at Gulfstream Park. No, the competition wasn't nearly, what it's going to be in the Breeders' Cup, obviously, but you can say that about a lot of the horses. Just the way she won, wide on both turns in her last start. Nice push button turn of foot when it was time to go, and opens up on the field nicely. Does it in good time, like something like a second and a half faster than the male division ran 2 races later. The Eclipse Thoroughbreds, Aaron Wellman and his guys thought enough about her to go out and buy her, send her to Todd Pletcher. So now you got the Pletcher factor involved. Not that there's anything wrong with Jose Pinchin, but who had her in California, but now that goes into the barn at Todd Pletcher, and it's not inconceivable to expect a little bump, a little bit of improvement. So I think she's as good as anything else in here, and she's 12-1.
A very logical case. Jerry, let's throw it back to you for your next selection.
Okay, I'm going to go on the turf, since that was my favorite thing to ride on. I'm going to go to the Juvenile Fillies turf. And I think a race that Aidan O'Brien has never won before, but I think this is his best chance. He brings over Meditate. She comes off a 6 and a 7 furlong race. She's never been this far. But typically horses that are effective at 6 and 7 in Europe, those are pretty demanding 6 furlong and 7 furlong races. They can get that extra eighth of a mile. So a mile here isn't that big of a stretch for them. And I just think she's better than our fillies here, better than any other European. And the biggest challenge to her here in America, I think, would be 2 fillies coming off wins. Delight here at Keeneland in the Jessamine, and Pleasant Passage in the Miss Grillo. But both of those fillies got away with very slow fractions on the lead, easy leads, which was a huge advantage for both of them. And then they sprinted away from their competition. So I think that their wins don't necessarily tell the whole story, because it was kind of easy for them. And this gets a much more difficult for them. As a matter of fact, I would like running second. I would like a filly of Chad Brown's named Free Look, who was second in the Miss Grillo. I think she has a better chance now of catching up through the stretch, and she's not going to be that far off the pace. But I'm going with Meditate for Aidan O'Brien in the Juvenile Filly turf.
Music to my ears, as I'm a big fan of hers. I think she's looked great. Randy, a tangent question before we get to your next pick. When it comes to these European shippers like Meditate, you're such a numbers-oriented player. How do you try to look at these horses apples to apples, or do you sort of leave it apples to oranges and just make your best guess?
It's not always entirely accurate, Pete, but people can come up with a little bit of a formula, perhaps, to look at the time, whatever your preferable European ratings are, whether it be Racing Post ratings or Time Form ratings, and subtract 15 or 16 or 17 points from those based on which one you're using and whether they're 2-year-olds or older horses. And you can kind of get a nice guesstimate as to what the buyer speed figure, equivalent buyer speed figure might be. Another way to look at it is, for example, in the juvenile turf. Historically, when the Europeans, who have dominated that particular race, the male race, the last race on the card Friday, normally they'll run a buyer speed figure somewhere between 85 and 90. Okay, that's kind of the par for a good European when they come over here. And this year you've got Charlie Appleby, bringing over a really good horse in Silver Knot that he thinks is better than Mysterious Night, who dominated the summer stakes at Woodbine and ran in the mid-80s. So I think you can expect, going in, a horse like Silver Knot, for example, to run in the mid to upper 80s. And then you look and see, okay, can anyone in America match that based on what we've seen on paper? And obviously the answer would be no for what we've seen so far. So to me, that's why I think Silver Knot is right up there with Cave Rock on Friday as a most likely winner. although the price is probably not going to be much.
International books have Silver Knot very short. They've tightened up a lot around him. I think there's some positive buzz, and I think you could be right about that. Let's get to your fourth betting opportunity here.
All right, and I'll put Friday to bed with this one, and then Jerry and I can move on to Saturday. The Juvenile Turf Sprint. Okay. Normally 5.5 furlongs, 2-year-olds turf. You're going to look for speed, and maybe that's what'll happen. But in this case, you look for speed. It's certainly not hard to find. Because on the far outside, you've got the Platinum Queen, and all the Europeans talk about how incredibly fast she is, and she's going to be out front, and she's going to set the pace. Well, if you're going to be out in front and you're going to clear the field with the Platinum Queen, good luck with that. Because inside of her, you got Speedboat Beach and Bob Baffert. Inside of that, you got Tyler's Tribe, who's never been behind a race in his life. Inside of that, you got Sharp as a Tack, who is incredibly quick. On the rail, they talk about how fast Lady Hollywood is. Love Reigns is not exactly a slow horse, and neither is Dramatized. You got speed all over the place. Something's got to give. And so I'm going to suggest taking a look at the two of the Europeans, even though I really would prefer not to go for a European in here, but either the 5 Mischief Magic or the 6 Persian Force, depending on who's going to be the higher price, really. I kind of prefer Mischief Magic a little bit there, but I would even play exotics and put both of them in there because I think they're both going to be finishing well, and I think this really could be a race, despite the distance, that could fall apart toward the end. Too much.
I think you make a great point about the exotics, and that's something I learned from Stephen Christ a long time ago. Not that he originated the idea, but he was the one that popularized it to me, that if you can find that meltdown race, and sometimes don't even have to bet it that sophisticated of a manner, you box the best closers, and you can sometimes giant payouts. I could see something like that happening in this race. Let's move to Saturday with Jerry's third thought.
All right. So I'm going the Breeders' Cup Mile. We saw 2 years ago, and the Breeders' Cup Mile can often be dictated by post-position draw. It can give you a chance to win, but it also can take you completely out of the race. 2 years ago at Keeneland here, we saw a horse come from post 14, Order of Australia. Paid 73 to 1 he was. Paid boxcars. So you have a horse this year called Kinross, who's very highly regarded in Europe. He drew post 13, which is almost as bad. But he has a problem getting a mile. He's been winning at 6 and 7, and that's probably, I would say mostly, according to the Europeans, due to Frankie Dettori's being able to settle him early. Now he tries to do the extra eighth of a mile. He's 0 for 6 at a mile. So can he get it? He'll get some money because of Frankie and because of his record. And I think, to me, he's a throwout because I think he's going to be running about 1 mile and 70 yards. If he doesn't get hung in the first turn, he's got to take him back almost to last. And then he's got to probably circle the field. And that's a tall order. So to me, it falls on the obvious horse, and that's Modern Games. A horse that came over here as a juvenile, Randy said, and ran well. He went up to Canada, and he just toyed with the horses in the Woodbine Mile. He's drawn well. So I pretty much think that he is unbeatable in this race. The biggest danger, I think, to him would be number 3, Dream Loper. 5-year-old mare that's coming off a grade 1 win. Now, in that win, there was a horse that broke down, Judmonts, I think, and kind of interfered with 2 or 3 of the horses that had a chance in there. So that race is not quite as flattering as it looks on paper, but I still think she deserves a good chance. And there will be pace in here. The horse from California that was second last year, Smooth Like Straight, as well as the other California horse, Beyond Brilliant, will set a pretty good pace early. And I think Modern Games and Dream Loper sit the perfect trip, with Modern Games being the better of the two.
Randy, we'll bring you back in for your thought. Where you want to go on this Breeders' Cup Saturday?
All right. Now, the filly and mare sprint, I think that Goodnight Olive is a legitimate favorite, and I've loved her most recent races visually, and I think she's going to get a nice pace set up, but she's also probably going to be, 5 to 2, 3 to 1, even in that field. She would be a good play, but I'm gonna say the sprint. Okay, all the respect in the world for Jackie's Warrior, and oddly enough, here we are in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, and there's really not that much competing early speed to go with Jackie's Warrior, right? The horse from the rail is the only other horse. Was something J.
Hurricane J.
Hurricane J. Something J. It shows you how much attention I paid him. Probably shouldn't even be in the race. But
are you going to bust that kind of comment out on NBC? That's what I want to hear.
Yeah. He's totally outclassed, so you can't expect him to give Jackie's Warrior much of a tussle early. So Jackie's going to control them. Okay, so I get all of that, and he is the most likely winner. If you were to put percentage chances on the horses to win, Jackie's Warrior would be the most likely winner of the race. He's probably going to be 4 to 5. But I don't think Elite Power is too far behind Jackie's Warrior based on the visuals that I've seen from his last 4 or 5 races. He beat nothing in the Vosburg. It's probably the weakest Vosburg field that we've seen in a quarter century. But again, he did it in very eye-catching fashion. He's got a really quick turn of speed. He's on a roll right now for Bill Mott. And so I can see Jackie's Warrior getting run down at the end. Jackie's Warrior has a developing habit of maybe underperforming on the biggest stage sometimes. He's coming off a loss. So Elite Power at 6 to 1. I think you can do a lot worse in taking a shot against Jackie's Warrior with a horse that is at the very top of his game.
Another tangent question. This one for Jerry. One of the handicapping angles we've talked about since the beginning of these podcasts ad nauseum. If there was a bingo card of things we say on the show, Bill Mott with a target would be one of the things. As somebody who had such a long and prolific relationship with Bill Mott, do you think there's something to that idea in particular when he's pointed for a race a long way out, more so than other trainers? Do you give Bill Mott runners extra credit in that scenario?
Well, honestly, the way I think of it, Bill Mott off the bench is the most dangerous Bill Mott that I can imagine. With a layoff, he doesn't need a prep race. So if you want to go a step further, if he's pointing toward one, then he'll take a last prep and then give him time coming into this. So yeah, I suppose so. He and Shug McGahee, to me, if they circle something on the calendar and that's their end goal, they usually get there pretty well.
Unfortunately, I don't think that handicapping angle, though, Pete, necessarily applies to Elite Power, because Elite Power was the kind of horse that in the summer, going into the month of June, he was still a maiden.
Right.
So it's not as if Mott had circled the Breeders' Cup Sprint on his calendar and started working backwards from it. The horse was unbelievable in his maiden race, and so Mott put him in a non-winners of a race other than conservative Bill Mott, and he was unbelievable. So then he put him in a non-winners of 2 other than, and he was unbelievable. And then he gave him a shot in the Vosburg to see if maybe he was good enough to run in the Breeders' Cup, and he got the Vosburg done in impressive fashion. So I think the horse is kind of taken in there in a sense, maybe unexpectedly. So I don't really think this is a race that Mott has been, really, really planning for, as the example that you gave.
I think that makes sense. I think that probably applies more to a Cody's Wish. The question popped in my head, and to have Jerry to ask, hey, this thing I say all the time, is it actually true? I thought it was too good of an opportunity.
And Warlike Goddess as well. It's another example.
Exactly. Jerry, let's keep going with your next race you want to talk about here.
How many more races do I have left to choose from?
I think we're going to do 2 more each, and then you'll have some open-ended questions at the end to get some other stuff in there.
Okay, I'm going to take this one before Randy does, because I know he thinks highly of this race, and that's the distaff. The best edition of the distaff I've seen in maybe 10, maybe 15 years. I mean, this is really deep, and a lot of these fillies could win. I think, obviously, Todd Pletcher has a very strong hand with the 2 fillies, Malathaat and Nest. I give Nest the slightest of advantages for one reason. Malathaat is a grinder. She takes a while to get her rhythm going, and then she comes with a long, powerful run, usually good enough to win. Nest, as she showed in the Ashland here at Keeneland, has the ability to, in the middle of the race, to make a move and change the complexion of the race if need be. She's got that prolonged half-mile move if she needs to. And, of course, we know she was second to Belmont, so at 1.5 miles, so the distance is absolutely no issue. I think she just gets a slight advantage over Nest, but over Malathaat, rather. But then you have Clairiere, who beat Malathaat twice, comes off a real stinker, and there's a reason for that. She acted up severely in the gate. She bit her tongue, and she finished horribly. She finished last by many. So to me, that's a throw out. So maybe she gets back to her form. You also have a filly called Society, who was brilliant in the cotillion, winning on the lead. She is really clearly the speed in here. Even though search results has speed, we saw her bottom out at Belmont in maybe the Phipps it was, but she looked like a winner in mid-stretch, and then all of a sudden she ran out of air. So I don't think she challenges Society early in the race. She's very conservative early. So Society could get a clear lead and wire the field. She would have to improve to do that. But to me, it's a very interesting race because you have a lot of depth.
If I forced you to make a selection, though, you'd go with Nest.
I'd go with Nest.
It's a fascinating race, and I do think it's a lot more complicated than just the two Pletchers, the way that it's been bet in the international markets for so long. Things are starting to tighten up now, though. Randy, where shall we go from here?
Well, Jerry just told you who was going to win the race, and then he didn't pick her.
Society, is that where you're going?
All right, look. So we all know how dominant early speed is in American horse racing on dirt. And when you can get a situation where you've got a filly that's high quality, that's on the top of her game, that's going to get an uncontested early advantage, and it's going to be 6-1 or 8-1, go. Right? That's a green light that's like flashing, and that's Society. Yeah, I mean, when you go back and look at her two races back in the Charlestown Oaks, and I went back and looked at it after the fact. You know, I didn't watch it live or anything like that. I knew she'd already won, you know, by 6 3/4 lengths. So I went back and watched it, and I'm like, they leave the gate, and I'm like, holy cow! How did this filly last even 7 furlongs? She was so aggressive away from the starting gate. It was a 2-turn race at Charlestown. And she came back and then went to the rider, Tyler Gafflin, on that day. And then when it was time to go, she just opened up again. And then she came back in the cotillion against Secret Oath. And we know how good the cotillion is always at Parks. And same thing. She blasted off from the starting gate. And then she blasted off again going into the second turn and just completely dominated that field. I mean, Secret Oath tried to make a little run at her coming to the quarter pole, and she just spit in Secret Oath's face and just kicked on and drew off. So now you got a situation where, look, all the respect in the world for Nest, all the respect in the world for Malathaat. Search results is, for the reasons Jerry gave you, is not going to want to go with her. She wants to sit second and hope that she can get the mile in an 8. All respect in the world for Clairiere. I think she's actually got a great shot to outrun Malathaat again, which is what she did 2 times earlier in the year before she threw her fit in the gate. But they're going to have Society to catch.
But I also told you why I think Nest will win, because she can, in the middle of the race, she can adjust. And when Society's out there on her lonesome, Nest can go after her. So, yes, I told you exactly why I thought Nest would win.
I really want to watch the NBC coverage of the Breeders' Cup this weekend, but what I'd really like to see is the Randy and Jerry buddy comedy. Maybe you could be policemen, I don't know, or maybe we just do it as a reality show, the behind the scenes of what's going on in the trailer. I enjoy the bickering, guys.
Yeah, you don't get as much of that actually on air because we're
You have no idea the content of our conversations every day. It can go from the ridiculous to the sublime. I mean, it spans the entirety of the planet Earth.
We might have $5 or $6 bets between the two of us on the Breeders' Cup card, ranging anything from horse to horse on 220 to 1 shots.
How fast they'll go the first half mile.
Fractional times, Mark, you name it.
I'm just laying it out there, guys. If you ever want to do a podcast, you know who to call. I'm just saying. I think we can have something here.
We toyed with the idea during the pandemic.
Let's do our number 1 best bet, and then I've got a couple of general questions for you so we can cover some other ground.
Mine was Society. I jumped the gun. Go ahead.
That's your best bet?
Yeah, at 8-1.
All right, so that was the best, but you jumped the gun.
Best value bet or surest to
Best
win?
value bet.
We'll say value bet, yes. So you can think about. I'll stallify while you two get organized, and whichever one of you is ready to go first.
Good. Thank you for that.
It's a technique we've developed over the years on the podcast where they don't really say anything of much substance, but I'm talking, so it's not just like leaving dead air on YouTube. The guest finds, usually it's Kinchin looking up a horse, or it's me trying to remember the name of some whiskey I drank, and then eventually at the end of it, we land the plane and the show continues smoothly. Who's got something for me?
Don't tell anybody, Pete, but we do that too on NBC sometimes.
So
It'll be our little secret.
I don't know if this will come to fruition. Laurel River is 9-2.
Go ahead. Now I got to look for another one.
You're gonna he's 4.5 to 1. I don't know if he will end up at 4.5 to 1, but based upon the morning line, to me, I think he'll win. And even if you get 4 to 1 or 3.5 to 1, I think he's a solid bet.
What's impressed you about it?
Let me just tell you something. He sits in Minneapolis and I sit in Fort Lauderdale, and we can look at a race or a number of races, and our thoughts will be almost identical 95% of the time when we're 1,200 miles away. So when he says Laurel River was going to be his pick, I believe that it was, because we look at things so much alike.
You know, now you're going to notice this when I tell you, but we have, like for the Derby, Preakness Belmont, sometimes Breeders' Cup, but not usually, we have this picks segment where everybody goes around the horn, everybody makes their pick. He always gets to go before me. So, and he said, we think alike on a lot of things. It could even be a 6 to 1 shot, and we both come up with them independently. But then I look like I'm copying Jerry. Jerry always gets to go first. I've thrown the BS flag on that so many times. It's never worked out. I never get to go.
I have to ask, because you guys have worked together for a minute. Were your processes always similar, or have you influenced one another over time?
No, we've influenced each other because he's taught me a ton about how to look at pace. Even though I thought I was really good at it riding, but that's reactionary. It's not looking at something and being able to determine a pre-race. But I'm a visual guy. He will say, I like this horse because of this. And he'll go to 4 or 5 different number scenarios about it. And I will say, I like the same horse, but only because of what I saw visually on the track. We'll come to the same conclusion, but mine is more visual and his is more mathematical based on a number formula.
And he's taught me a ton of things about how to look at a race from what the jockey's perspective might be, right? And in our conversation, because we're like this next to each other. We're not doing this just for your podcast. I mean, this is our desk. And
we don't sit this close. Usually,
yeah, we're a little further apart than that.
But for you, we're doing it.
Yeah, I don't like to sit this close to Jerry usually. But yeah, I mean, this is 6 days. You know, we go to dinner together, and I mean, we're talking about these things constantly, all the time. From the time 6:15 at Starbucks in the morning to the backside to sitting here all day to dinner, So, we've got a lot of time to talk about these things, and we almost always come to the same conclusions.
It's fascinating. It's so interesting about trying to, I think when you have a good set of pace figures and you're looking at a race and then you add in that layer of put yourself in the jockey's boots, and how's that going to affect the way this race pans out. And I think the best result of it, the best example of it I can think of on this card is that Distaff example where a previous rider was fired for going too hard early in the FIPS on search results. So how is there any scenario where search results is going to be right there with society? It can't happen even if pace figures say it could happen. Is it that type of thing you're referring to, Randy?
It can be, yeah. But sometimes the pace figures are a little bit more subtle than that, okay? A good example that might not necessarily jump off the page to some people, but would be Kimari in the Filly Mare Sprint. Now, you can make a case, and I'm not saying she can't win because she's coming off 2 back-to-back triple-digit buyer speed figures. She's been unsound for a lot of her career, and now Wesley Ward says he's finally got her completely sound, and he can train her really hard, which he couldn't do before, and he credits her improvement to that. But if you look at Kimari's history, when she gets in races where they're going to go 44 and change for the first half mile, and she's either going to be out the back or she's got to be pushed to keep up to get a little closer, she doesn't react very well. Those are the worst races on her form. Her last couple of races with the triple digit buyers, short fields, soft fractions. She's right there close to the pace, going at her own little leisurely clip. And then she runs exceptionally well. So from a pace figure perspective, Kimari, for pace handicapping guys, would be a throwout because there's a ton of early speed. in the filly mare sprint, a ton, almost like the juvenile turf sprint. And she's going to be in that position where she's either going to have to be close, going faster than she likes, or she's going to be out the back, and that doesn't work for her either.
So
Sorry.
No.
I've
See,
got
he does the first 2 races on the card. He wanted the extra work and the extra practice of the filly mare sprint and the turf sprint, and I bowed out.
Yeah, we were both off for the first 2 races, and then the other day that I said, Randy, how do you feel about Jerry? How do you feel about the filly mare sprint and the turf sprint? Because Eddie Olczyk is not going to be with us unfortunately this weekend, and so there was an opening.
So I thought 12 races is enough for me, but Randy thought he needed 2 more.
fair enough.
Those are 2 great races.
Yeah, it more than most years. I feel like there are storylines throughout every race. You pointed this out when we did the Monster Pod together, Eddie. You can just double up there. We don't have to force you to have another horse to talk about, but I'd be accused of a host fail if I didn't at least try to get another thought out of you. Where do you want to go for your last, if not necessarily best pick?
Why don't we both go the same race, the Classic?
Oh,
Well,
that's all.
he's going to be 2-5 though.
I'm going to ask you about that one. I'll ask you about that one anyway. That'll be the last one. We'll do a little speed, but I don't want to keep you like 4 or 5 more minutes. I know you got stuff to do, but we can go right through that.
All right. I don't know what price he's going to be. Again, it's not an 8-1 shot, unfortunately, but I'm a big fan of Nation's Pride in the Breeders' Cup Turf.
Sure.
Now, I agree. Laurel River I love Laurel River in the dirt mile, but Jerry already took that one.
Yep.
So, look, Nation's Pride, I thought, now, okay, let me try to phrase this the right way. Let me rehearse what I'm going to say on NBC.
That works.
But we can't be this inside baseball on NBC. Last year, Yabir was shipped over by Charlie Appleby and Godolphin for the Jockey Club Derby at Belmont Park, and he won. I think he got a 94 buyer speed figure, and he looked good. He came from way back, and he looked good. Back to England, came back over here to run in the Breeders' Cup turf, and comes with this bat out of hell closing kick, 22 and change last quarter mile, gets up to win, and runs a buyer speed figure. I believe it was 10 points faster than what he had run in the Jockey Club Derby. Now, fast forward a year, you got another 3-year-old brought over, not just for the Jockey Club Derby, but for the 2 other turf derbies that Naira had before that. And we can talk about the progression there, but I don't think we need to. Nation's Pride was unleashed a devastating closing kick to win the Jockey Club Derby. And it was by far, in my opinion, more visually impressive than Yabir the year before. And now you've got the same development, no races in between, send back to England. You got Charlie Appleby now pointing for the Breeders' Cup Turf, training up to the Breeders' Cup Turf. You've got William Buick choosing to ride Nation's Pride over the other horse of Charlie Appleby's coming from Germany, who's got good form. So if you can get 4-1 or 9-2 or even 7-2 on Nation's Pride, I think it's a pretty good play.
All right, we've done the best bets piece of this show. We encourage people who are watching on YouTube or even listening to the podcast version, go over to YouTube. Drop us in the comments who your best bet of the 2 days is. Always great to get a sense of what's going on out there in the audience. Meanwhile, for you two guys, I'll give you 2 more questions to close things out, and we'll start off. We're going to get to Flightline eventually, but first I want to ask you about a favorite you don't like, one you're really looking forward to taking on at this year's Breeders' Cup. And Jerry, we'll throw it back to you for that one. Is there a favorite you think can't win, or you really don't like their chances?
No, well, it's Jackie's Warrior. Randy mentioned it earlier. I just don't trust him. On the biggest days, it seems like he's been the biggest disappointment to me. And all signs indicate he's going to win because he's really the only speed in the sprint, and he's got class, and we know that, and he'll likely win. But I don't trust him.
That's fair enough.
For me, it's Golden Pal.
Interesting.
And I know also, just like Jerry said about Jackie's Warrior, it's a little bizarre that here in the turf sprint, you've got a scenario in which there seems to be no serious competing speed for Golden Pal. I mean, we've heard from some European guys who we respect that float us has a lot of early speed and is going to be sent from the inside by Holly Dolan. But you look at the past performances, Flotus's last start dwelt, right? It's a typical Euro thing, right? I mean, they always think they can get out there and run with the Americans early. Good luck with that. So I'm assuming Golden Pal is going to make the clear early lead. But he did last time in his prep race at Keeneland, and he won. But I guess the word that we most frequently used is underwhelmed with the way he finished that race. And now you've got like Highland Princess. I know the Euros traditionally don't do all that well in there other than Glass Slippers, who've got a dream run up the rail. But Highland Princess is probably the best sprinter they've shipped over here before ever. And she's on a roll. She's got tactical speed. I can very clearly see a scenario where if Highland Princess is sitting a length and a half behind Golden Pal turning for home, if she can sit in that stalking position, I think she's got that tactical speed, then I think she'll give it the Euro finish, and I think she can outkick Golden Pal in the last part of the race in an upset.
I say this not to bust your shoes, Randy, but just to prevent you from saying it on NBC. Highfield. I was calling Highland too.
Highland, Highfield.
Pete,
Thank you.
Pete, he would have got a note from me right there in front, as he does for me on many occasions, because I am the king of mispronouncing names, and we have a running joke about it.
And I'll give you a sneak preview. I've already about 10 times this week, and you go back a little way, Pete. I've said Olympio instead of Olympiad. So I'm fighting that battle hard in my mind. Don't say Olympio. It was a nice 3-year-old way back in the day for Ron McAnally.
So, Pete, do you have your past performances in front of you?
I do.
I'm going to challenge you to pronounce this name correctly. The
Okay.
13 filly and the juvenile filly turf.
I'm saying Zygira. What is that right?
Kijira.
Kijira.
Yeah.
Kijira. Oh my goodness.
People
I've
don't
butchered
understand
that.
this. We spend a fair amount of time just make sure we know the correct pronunciation of some of these horses that are confusing.
Kijira is a safari outfit in Botswana that owner, I think it's Richard Wrigley, has visited on occasion, likes to bring his family with him to go on these upscale safaris. So, we got online and actually saw a video of people that work there, and it's Kijira.
Kijira. I love it. I won't get that one wrong again. Taiba, right? I still hear people saying Taiba, but it's Taiba.
Taiba.
That comes straight from Amsterdam.
Excellent. I thought so. I just wanted to double check because I've heard enough people get it wrong that I'm like, hey, wait, maybe I'm the one who's wrong. So.
Taiba is a nickname for Medina. It's sort of like Gotham in New York City.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of the locals in Medina, where he's from, which is why he named the horse Medina Spirit, call it Taiba, and so that's why he named it Taiba.
That's fantastic stuff.
The ultimate researcher.
Yeah, that's
the fountain of useless information.
We got to ask this one question before I let you get out of here. What are we going to see from Flightline? Jerry, we're going to go with you first on this.
I think you're going to see something special. I don't think you're going to see the Pacific Classic. I mean, this is a better field, top to bottom. But I don't see any chinks in his armor. I really don't. I think he's overcome some adversity in the Met Mile. I think he will relax enough with the pace that Life is Good will set early to be off of him at least until they turn down the backside. But we both agree that that's where the race gets really, really interesting, because both horses beat their competition in part by their move starting about the 3/4 pole, and they start to spread the race out. So I think that's where the pace gets quicker. That's where the separation between those two and the rest of the field happens. And I can't tell you what's going to happen after that. I think Flightline puts him away somewhere, at the top of the stretch. Maybe it's middle of the stretch, but I think Flightline wins and wins fairly comfortably.
I would agree.
You sound hesitant.
No. There's one scenario. There's one conceivable scenario, the only conceivable scenario that I can see. And that's the one that Todd Pletcher is banking on. And I would call it the Olympiad factor. Olympiad. Make sure I get that right. Olympiad factor. We saw Olympiad run through that winning streak that he had during the middle of the year. And every one of his races looked exactly the same. He broke sharply from the gate, tactical speed, set second. There was a horse in front of him that he was dominant against, but he would sit there and track until he got to past the half-mile pole in the second turn, far turn, and then they'd say go, and he'd just rush past the horse and look very impressive and just draw off. And then he runs. I don't remember what the race was. Was it the Whitney?
Whitney.
Okay, so he's in against Life is Good. And they're going down the backstretch, same spot, same deal. Life is Good is in front. Here's Olympiad just sitting there second, just tracking. And then they said, okay, go get him. And he couldn't. At least not right away, right? He tried, couldn't. They go into the turn, tries again, can't. And then at that point, Olympiad discouraged. Well, this is not the way it's supposed to go. What is this? What is this horse doing? I'm supposed to go by this horse. and Olympiad just checks out and runs by far the worst race of all his recent races. Flightline has never had to chase a horse as talented as Life is Good, ever. This is clearly by far the strongest field that Flightline has ever had to run against. He's never had to chase a horse with that kind of ability before, right? When it comes time down the backstretch and you still have a relatively fresh Life is Good, and Flightline wants to go, and he wants to go up and grab Life is Good, and it's not quite as easy as it has been in the past. And Life is Good is fighting back, and Life is Good is giving him a 112 buyer speed figure response. Is Flightline, how is he going to react to that? If they hook up together and they both take off like bats out of hell down the backstretch, and they open up 10 lengths on the field, could that be a possible vulnerability in the last 16th of a mile for Epicenter or Ateva, to come and take advantage of? I don't think so. I think Flightline is going to win and probably put on a show, but I can see that scenario.
One thing in the Plus editor Tyler Wistman has pointed out too is it's not exactly like Flightline is the greatest gate horse. And if he gives himself a little bit too much extra to do, I could see it leading to a scenario like that. Personally, though, I think he's more ready than he's ever been. He's going to break with it's interesting. Ask you, would you say that Life is Good scenario?
You broke up.
Oh, the most likely upsetter for the Classic. Okay. Would you say it is Life is Good or one of the closers?
No. I don't think Life is Good will be on the board.
No.
Okay.
I think it's probably Epicenter or Teva.
Do not put Life is Good in your exactas or trifectas. He is the second best horse in the race, right? If Flightline was not in the race, Life is Good would have a fighting chance to go wire to wire at 1.25 miles even. But this is one of those classic scenarios where the second best horse in the race shape does not favor him in the least. And so he's not likely to hang around for second or third once Flightline goes by him.
It makes sense to me, and it's a very, very interesting race from a sporting point of view, if not a betting point of view. But maybe you can get clever with exactas or coming out of that turf, or try to find some way to get paid at the end of this year's race. But
you want an interesting? We haven't even talked. This is something we haven't even talked about. You want an interesting horse for horse, right? Prop. Life is Good versus Rich Strike.
Oh, I'll take Rich Strike all day long.
There you go.
Because he needs a hot pace. He's going to get that.
Yeah.
And if Sonny Leon will be patient like he was not in the Travers, if he's patient like he was in the Kentucky Derby, then he's going to be the horse running fastest at the end. Now, whether he can catch up or not, I don't think he'll catch the winner, but whether he can catch up enough to be in the exotics, that's yet to be determined.
Are they offering that prop in Vegas?
I haven't seen it, but it's a great one, and I think we might get plus money on that. Don't you think?
Yeah. I think probably Life is Good would be the favorite in that matchup, and we don't agree.
I'd take it all day long. I'd take
on the known form. In the abstract, sure, but given the specifics of these scenarios, I'm completely with you guys. This has been such fun for me, such fun for the viewers. Going to let you get back to your preparations. Consider the buddy comedy. Consider the podcast. In the Money Media is here for you if we need you. Really, really appreciate your time today.
Now we're going to separate and social distance.
See you, Pete.
All right, buddy.
Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.
We'll thank Randy and Jerry one more time, our sponsors at the Breeders' Cup. For In the Money Media, I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. May you win all your photos.